It's not me, it's the people that work around me. If you have a good, strong team and everyone's focused on the same goals, it makes everything a lot easier. And, we really have a great team here in the civil side of Balfour Beatty, and I'm just really blessed to have them around me.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zhao. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I am your host, Michael Zhao, the founder and CEO of Yellowbird. Joining me today from North Carolina is Eric Yates, Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety at Balfour Beatty Infrastructure. Eric brings 27 years of experience in the construction industry with over 15 years of dedicated safety leadership. He holds a CSP, an ASP, a CHST certifications. He's very obviously educated and qualified, but more importantly, as we will talk about, he also has the real world hands-on experience, both from a regulatory perspective, relentless continuous improvement focus. At Balfour Beatty, he leads the direction of their EHS program, both from a complex civil construction project focused embedding culture for a zero harm strategy within the organization. He is passionate about leveraging technology, data, process refinement. He's got high-performing EHS teams. Basically, he is the top tier of top-tier EHS professionals, and I am just delighted to have you. So thank you, Eric, for joining me.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Michael. Maybe a little over the top there with maybe on the top, but
I've never given an intro in my life because I am very blessed to have wonderful people like you that the people not only felt embarrassed, but also it is humility that makes you a great leader. And it's hard to have somebody say all these great things about you. Let's talk about the important stuff first, because none of this is important without understanding that we are all human beings and we all do what we do for our families and for each other's families and for those that we love. So tell me a little bit about the people in your life that you love and your family, your journey, kind of how you got here, if you don't mind.
good, Michael. Yeah, so I do have a fairly decent family. I have four children, two adults, and one in middle school and one that just started high school. So that's also a journey right now. And then, of course, my beautiful wife. So the oldest is my daughter. Also have a grandson who's
Wonderful.
5. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then I have 3 boys under her. So,
All right. 3 boys under. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, you definitely have a full house. Keep going, your wife.
Yes. So my wife, Julie, and so that consists of my family. And, if you add in the 2 Basset Hounds, then we've got the complete family. So,
Well, it's funny because you said to me that you were recording this from home today because of the background noise and the distraction that you'd have in your office. And I kind of giggled because you had mentioned on an initial call that you had Basset Hounds, and every Basset Hound I've ever known does that howling thing at the most inappropriate times. And if I know anything about people's households, I know that it's generally not controlled environment where it can be quiet. So I'm actually in the office for the exact same reason. I go to the office to get to the quiet. You actually stayed home to stay in the quiet. So that's quite a moment. How long have you and your wife been married?
so we've been married since 2009.
2009.
9.
All right. Fantastic. Well, that is a journey in its own right. And I'll tell you what, it's a long time, 16 years. So yeah, I'm coming. I just passed my 25th year anniversary and have a couple of kids myself. One's in college as a junior and one's at high school as a junior. So our house is getting a little bit quieter now that I have a driver that is no longer needing us to travel around with her all the time. So tell me about your journey in EHS. I always start this by saying that I rarely find people, although with your degrees and so forth, you may be the exception. But I rarely find people who actually got into health and safety through the journey of college. They generally will back into it and then go and get the degrees and certifications and the things that they need to do their jobs better, but often backed into it through other methods. Can you tell me about how you ended up here?
Sure. Yeah, Michael. So I guess I could start back from probably the beginning of just the industry in general and how it's influenced me. I come from a family of heavy construction, civil construction background. So I was around it growing up, all my life, and then got into residential construction, when I was a teenager and in the summers out of high school, and really enjoyed that. And I thought that was my passion, was to build things. I love to build things. I love to see progress and, stand back at the end of the day and just take a look at, what people's built. So that took me on a journey of, starting a residential construction business,
Good for you.
ripping light commercial construction in Western North Carolina, where I lived at the time. And 2008 happened. Everyone
Yes.
probably remembers 2008. And
Yes, absolutely.
I will say, not unfortunately, but fortunately, God put me in the direction where my true calling is in life, and that is safety, health and safety, just being a person, for the people that I work around, being that person. So from 2008, it was really a rough ride for about 2 years with no employment. Um, you know, really, my wife and I, we were a couple of payments from losing our house, and I got an opportunity to work in the oil and gas industry in the Marcellus Shale in central Pennsylvania. And so that's where my journey into, real safety started, as a safety director for a small welding company in Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
For a welding company so you were doing the welding on the rigs and the pipe and all that kind of stuff up in Pennsylvania. I know that background very well because I served the oil and gas industry for a long time. There is no more vitally important health and safety environment than that environment. It is a tough environment to keep people safe. So so you ended up doing that, and you worked for a welding company up there. And so that was where the journey began around 2010 thereabouts. And so tell me about that. So you were it was a relatively small organization, and up in Pennsylvania, you were away from your family, which had to be challenging.
Well, actually, Michael, I brought my family with me. Wherever I go, they've always traveled with me. We've moved, we've, sucked it up and loaded up the U-Hauls and,
Love
moved
it.
around where we had to. So,
Good for you.
um,
Good for you.
yeah, and that's really, an important foundation for me is my family and their families. So,
I love that. Good.
um, yeah, so I didn't know really what to expect with a safety profession. I mean, to me, it's very new. I mean, I understood about safety just from the construction industry and owning a business, but not necessarily from, the side of a safety professional. So it was definitely a learning curve in the beginning for me. And I'm sure for the people that worked around me as well, because this company was very small. And, I believe at the time I came in, there were roughly 60, employees. And, when I left, it was around 200, maybe 250, really a growth spurt for that company. And so, I actually grew with the company. So, and then pursued a degree in occupational safety and health and finished that up and, obtained my CSP and, had an opportunity to work, to get into the civils business with Balfour Beatty infrastructure and take what I had learned, from the oil and gas, my previous construction experience, and, start applying more of, um, you know, my leadership skills and, the knowledge that I gained over the years from just being around the industry my whole life.
So how long were you with this organization prior to joining Balfour Beatty?
A little over 2 years.
Wow. So they went from roughly 60 employees to 200 employees in 2 years. And you were responsible for the health and safety of all of that growth. That must have been an experience. And since you were in Pennsylvania working on a shale, I've done that work and I know exactly what that's like. Both there, we used to do the communications out there, but also in the Bakken Shale over in the Dakotas, as well as in Texas. So yeah, I know that environment well, and that's explosive growth for 2 years. So I imagine I always say you probably lived multiple companies worth of experiences staying in one place, just trying to figure out how to put these things in place. So, and so you came on with Balfour Beatty, and from that perspective, you know, did you move again? Did you actually, when you got this job, you moved back to North Carolina, correct?
Yes. So actually, I took the job with Balfour Beatty as not a career movement, like an upward movement in my career, but as an opportunity that I could see. And so I came in with Balfour Beatty as a project safety manager on a large wastewater treatment plant project in Baltimore.
Okay.
And so that's where I started my civil safety journey. And with Balfour Beatty, who I've been with since that September in 2012.
That's fantastic. So you are also, you know, going back to your family and your journey. So you were relatively newly married, 4 years. You had young kids. You had traveling around. Now you're changing environments. That must have been quite an experience for everybody involved. And so you went from one of the roughest, dirtiest environments, most challenging environments that you can have in the oil field. And then you went into this large wastewater treatment plant, which I know everybody goes, oh, wastewater is definitely dirty. It's actually really, very not dirty. It's very, very controlled. And it's not a Wild West environment like the oil and gas world. It's civil engineering, civil projects are very big and very deliberate. So what was that transition like for you?
It was definitely a transition. I mean, if you're familiar with the oil and gas industry, the big players, their safety programs are pretty much zero tolerance across the board. They're very involved with their community relationships. And, not only is on-site safety, a huge factor for them, but also, how the company presents itself to the community as it's working for them as a subcontractor. So, going from, I think I probably have to be careful how I word this, because I do not want to diminish, the safety program of Balfour Beatty in any way, because I think it is like the standard safety program.
And
But oil and gas,
and recognized as such. You
yes,
guys do a
yes,
fantastic job. So
yes,
yeah.
most definitely. And I think the oil and gas, they're non-negotiables, if you would, want to put it that way. There's zero tolerance, even for very minor, maybe safety violations. I do not like that word violations, but that's what it is, in their eyes. And there's no second chance in a lot of those programs. And rightfully so, because of the dangers working on a gas pad. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. What people don't realize, and you can attest to this, that every single project in the oil and gas world tends to be day rate, or from people to the materials to the rigs to the generators. Everything is by the day, and there's a by the day, and there is a mindset there of people are replaceable commodities to a degree. As much as I hate to say that, because they're human beings and they're not. But that does give you the luxury. And frankly, I think it puts people in behind the eight ball a little bit, because if you have zero tolerance, you're not developing people. You're terminating people, and obviously it's important to develop people into better leaders, into better workers. And if you fire somebody for a minor infraction of any sort, obviously there are things that are worthy of being fired, and there are things that are worthy of being coached. Right. and hopefully we have a society that allows for a little bit of coaching. So along those lines, so tell me about your journey at Balfour Beatty. How did you? So you went into the civil group, and you guys were building this large wastewater civil project. And then how did you go from there? What was the story?
Yeah, so I've learned a lot on that project. Since 2012 to 2013, I was based on that project, and eventually started overseeing other projects in the area in Virginia and Maryland that we had going on. And again, God, he wanted to change my direction a little bit more, and so he presented the opportunity for me to actually get into the southeast region of the infrastructure side, which is more highway bridge roadway project. And where I was Frucon, which was a division of Balfour Beatty, and so they were strictly water wastewater. And so I transitioned from the water wastewater to highway heavy civil in 2015, and just had great leadership in the southeast region, surrounded by great people, a great family, a lot of experience and tenure. If anyone's watching this that's works for Balfour, I mean, we are very tenured with our experts. So had the opportunity to learn from a lot of experienced folks in our business and on our teams, and also get involved with some external organizations as well, which I think has a tremendous impact on our industry. And sometimes I think that resource, we may not leverage it enough, some of the organizations.
It's so true. It's so true. So along those lines, and let's take a pause on your journey and just tell us a little bit about your company. It's funny. I've only known you as in disaster restoration and response work, which you do have do a fair amount of that kind of stuff, because I was in the satellite communications world, which is where I got in the oil and gas and remote communications and things like that. And so I knew y'all from that side of the house. But you're foundationally quite a substantial construction large projects company. Can you tell us a little bit more about just the company, what it looks like, all the regions and places and stuff, if you don't mind?
Sure, Michael. Yeah, so I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. So on the bigger picture, we are part of Balfour Beatty PLC, based out of London. And so the US is basically an opco of the PLC. And we have operations all across the world, in major areas like Hong Kong and the UK. I believe we're in Ireland right now. And then, of course, the US, a heavy presence in the US right now. And so if you just look at our US operations, we have our building side, which is commercial or vertical work. So that would be hospitals, schools, universities, apartment complex, condos.
And is that in all 50 states? Are you doing this everywhere, or is there a regional
so
presence?
We're pretty much the smile in the U.S. So we're from Washington State, down through California, down through Texas, all the way over Florida, and then back up to the Mid-Atlantic.
It literally
that's
is
our
a
presence.
smile. That's
Right.
That's great. That's great. Okay.
And then we have, so that's one of our opcos in the U.S. And we also have Civils, which is the group I work with, and also the Balfour Beatty Communities, which is military housing.
So as the vice president of EHS, is it are you over all in the US, or do you focus primarily on, are you the vice president of EHS for civil?
For civils, Balfour Beatty Infrastructure.
Got it.
Yes,
Okay.
and we're broken into roughly, I think it'd be more or less three different regions, divisions. We have the Southeast, which is the Carolinas and Georgia. And we also have the Southwest, which is our Texas group. And then we have our Western region, which is California. And we also have our rail division and also our total power group, which is our electrical manufacturing for some of the electrification for our rail systems we built and for clients.
So it's so interesting. Wow. So you had, when you had said about your journey in '08, little known fact about my journey was my father in '08. I always say he got retired. Now, he did very well for himself. He was in the banking world. He started in the, early 70s, right out of college as an accountant, and became a director of audit of all things for a big international bank. And then he got into the mortgage. He was actually reported to the board for a large mortgage company. And '08 happened, and he got retired. And I say he got retired because, the combination of his tenure and his salary and where the industry was, there were a lot of people that had to be let go and changes. And they offered him a package, and it's kind of a, here's your hat, what's your hurry kind of a conversation. So, congratulations, you're retired. And he wanted to consult and become a resource for people. And he thought it was going to be easy. As subject matter experts, we always do, right? We think, hey, my Rolodex is deep. I know all the people at ASSP and NSC and all these places. We have no problem consulting. And before you know it, you have one client, which is your former employer, and they're paying you slowly, and they are not always treating you like the employee any longer. And before you know it, those folks say, it's not worth my energy. I'm going to actually retire. And that's what happened to my dad. And again, there's no violins there. He did great. And he has a wonderful retirement, dealing with some health matters and so forth. So he wouldn't have been able to work much longer anyhow. But the concept of Yellowbird started, and I'm cycling back to yourself, and I'll ask you a question. This isn't a speech, but it started with, how could I help people like my dad in a technical world become on-demand consultants and service providers? Like, if I wanted to become a consultant, you got insurance, like we've got millions of dollars worth of insurance. I got 4 different policies for every pro on our network. I've got, you got receivables and payables and coordination and emails and invoicing and bureaucracy. And people that are talents, they don't want to do that. They just want to do their job, right? And so, going full circle back to you all with your spread, do you use independent people, or what do you do? We talked about travel and how your family has always gone with you. This industry is a live on airplanes industry, and it's tough. And so how do you manage the EHS programs within your area? Do you always staff, or do you outsource, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question, Michael. And first I want to go back. I think what you're saying about 2008 and the impact it had on you and your family, my family. I think that probably resonates with a lot of people in the construction industry. And then you also have the outer industry that supports that industry that is impacted. And it's just great to hear that you took that and you have, you know, um, evolved that into, something positive and trying to give back, to the industry. So
Thank you for that. That's very, very kind of you. Thank you. so, so from that perspective, what does operations look like for you? It's a very complex world that you're responsible for, with all these regulations. I mean, you mentioned a couple of states, and I'm not going to say which one's California, but that have very challenging, like they run by their own OSHA and their own regulations, and other places do as well. Like Arizona does. We have in Arizona ADOSH. So you got federal, you have state, you've got requirements. So how does it work internally for you all?
Well, going back to your I think question before this about how we manage our training. I think that's what you were getting at too, like our
Not just
which
training,
how
but just even operations, like just people, where people go and what they do, and it's just moving human beings around.
yes, what we're really regional, so that keeps the people close. But at times we do have to send resources elsewhere, right, where we have our experts and our experts are needed. And you are right. Some of the states are, when you just look at it from a regulatory perspective, it is seems like a little more difficult to work in those states. Maybe not difficult's the word. Maybe it's a little more effort. That's probably the right word to work in those states. And then, of course, we work in states, and I'm gonna, just shout out, North Carolina, who has a state plan, and it's just wonderful to work with the North Carolina Department of Labor. Partnership programs with our Balfour Beatty partner with them in North Carolina through their STAR program, and it's just an excellent partnership with the North Carolina Department. Wish it were everywhere that
Yeah.
partnership available, but um,
Well, it's funny. I think this industry, you know why, in my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, but I think we underemphasize the importance of localized relationships. You are in North Carolina. You have relationships there. You see them, they care about you. And in a nomadic world where you've got traveling resources, and especially if you send somebody, say, from Texas into California because they happen to be a, let's just say a fall from heights trainer, and they're really great, but maybe the fall from heights regulations in California are different than the fall from heights regulations in Texas. And I don't know the answer to that, by the way. So that's a random statement. Having a local resource that's worked in California for a long time is value, and it's interesting because a lot of folks say, well, my people are they know my company, and so I need to use my people. And I always say, well, reality is you have to work within the environment that you're in and make sure that everybody is getting the appropriate and correct training and surveys and even on-site supervision. So do you use external folks? And if so, what do you like about it? And frankly, what don't you like about it? Like, what are the challenges that you've had on both ends?
well, we certainly do use external training resources, and a driver of that is all the different regulations that we fall under. It's just specifically safety. I mean, we're an MSHA. We're also DOT. Federal OSHA, state-run plans, FRA. So we are a lot of regulatory bodies that are telling us what we can do, right, and can't do. And so sometimes leveraging experts that are external is more efficient and actually more beneficial to our folks too. Especially if like MSHA is not really a core of um, the work that we do in
Right.
every region that we have. So, in the
Exactly.
areas where we do have to get into mines and, get borrow or something, then we will try to use that external resource and their trainer to train our
Yes.
folks. Yeah.
Yeah. So internally, how do you manage that? Do you have a Rolodex that you use? Do you have like a spreadsheet that you manage? Like, how do you personally, you're like, okay, I need to get somebody that knows MSHA in Texas. I'm trying to use the smile as my guide, or Utah perhaps, or Oregon, one of those. But wherever it happens to be, how do you source these folks?
So I have my contacts, right? So yeah, I'll just reach out to my trainers that I do know that, and a lot of them train across the U.S. And if they are not available or that's just outside of their territory, they know someone who they would refer and recommend. And that's always nice too to have that referral because you are right. It's a lot of times it's not every area has that same training resource, that same person you're familiar with. And it's always nice to have a good referral to those
Oh, it
situations.
absolutely is. It's interesting because I the second foundation to the company after the first being my father's story was that I always had the right people in my Rolodex in the wrong locations or the wrong availability. And so I can't tell you how many times that I trusted the individual that I called on and say, hey, I know somebody who can do this work. And I'm sitting there and thinking to myself, I have no idea who's at my site. And so sometimes it's like, and this was my experience. I'm sure you guys have a much more stringent process and so forth. But what the secondary thing that we always focus on is I don't hire companies, or we don't represent companies. We represent people. That's why I said to you early on that this is a human podcast. We're a human to human company, even at scale. I'm a human to human company. Like I want to know that the person going out there has this specific experience, and sometimes even worked for the exact end customer at one point. It's shocking how close of a community it is. It's a really difficult thing that we've accomplished here with regards, we've got 7,000 resources now. So, I mean, it's getting pretty deep, but very different experience with an MSHA that's going to be in let's say a copper mine in Arizona than somebody who's going to be, doing confined space for, say, a pipeline in the Bakken Shale. They're both underground. They're both confined space. But it's a very different environment. You got to speak the language to be able to do the job. So, we've been chatting for I can't believe how quickly time goes by. So from a business perspective and your journey, you've moved up, you're a vice president of this group and in the civil side. And tell me a little bit about the kind of projects that you're all working on now, and frankly, what your business really, where you want to take, the safety program, but also just the business in general. A little plug for your company, and also, our industry that shows dynamic growth.
Yeah, that's a good question too. What do we have going on right now? And it's a lot.
It's
You know,
tear your hair out,
you know,
except, uh-oh.
yeah, Texas, the saying, everything's bigger in Texas. So,
Yes.
those roadway jobs are just massive projects. So if we've got two newer projects in Austin that are getting ready. One's already started. It's a Lady Bird Lake project, and then the Canyon project there in Austin as well. And then on the West Coast in California, we're doing a lot of rail maintenance right now for clients. We're finishing up several massive JV projects.
So rail maintenance would be like railroads and things to that effect, like working with
Yes.
the Amtraks and
Metrolink and
Metrolink. Yep.
Caltrain.
The Surf Rider. Yeah. I know the Surf Rider. I used to ride it when I was a kid. I'm from Southern California. So, okay. Yeah.
And we are finishing up LAWA, which is their LEX. It's the rail system, their LEX. And then you get to the Carolinas, we have a heavy presence just outside of New Bern on the US 70 corridor, three contracts right there with roadway improvement. And then we get down to Savannah. We are getting close to nearing the end of a project there in Rincon, Georgia, Effingham Parkway. And then, of course, we have our Total Power Group facility in Goldsboro, North Carolina. And, they service, clients, I think New York Metro and, Caltrain, clients all over the U.S.
Wow. You have a lot of moving parts and a lot of responsibility. It's interesting. We, as an organization at Yellowbird, we do a fair amount of training just to keep everybody, the contractors, subcontractors, people, because turnover is a real thing. And, you don't want somebody running heavy equipment that hasn't had their OSHA card, so it's a constant, whack-a-mole. I always call it whack-a-mole of training, right? It's like, okay, I got it. I only have to do it once or twice, once a year or every other year. It's like, yeah, but the people don't stay. Like, the people change. The environment's the same, but you can have 200, 300% turnover. But what we're doing a fair amount of is actually, and I don't even know if you knew this, was on-site safety representation, where somebody says, it's kind of staffing, but it's not, because we don't charge like a staffing company. We're saying, I need somebody who can be there for 6 months for this period of time to do and then I want somebody else. Because if we're doing land works, it's a different safety professional oversight than it is if I'm doing, steelworks or, electrical. And so you can really, move people in and out accordingly. So maybe there's something to chat about there. Again, never on this podcast for a pitch, but sounds like with all your moving parts, it might be something worthy of pursuing at some point.
Yeah, I think so, Michael. I mean, I just described the projects that are, you know, uh, some of the projects that we're just wrapping up and beginning. So, of course, there's other JD partnerships, larger projects, and to your point, we do hire, EHS staffing. A lot of times it's at the front end of the project or the back end. And then, in between, if we need some help, we do reach out to the EHS agencies and get staff.
Well, I'd love to have my team on that short list, or at least on the list somewhere. So thank you for that. I appreciate you even saying it. Again, it was never the intention of this discussion. I was just thinking, wow, you have a lot of things. There's just a lot of moving parts, which foundationally, we're not very good at a single service for a single location customer. And I say that not because we can't do it, but as you add scale and complexity and moving parts, better than anybody, it gets hard. Who is doing what, where, when, how am I tracking these things? Who's got their training, and where did we have an incident? How do we address that? And how do we update our safety training for that moment? There's going to be, obviously, what did you do after that situation? And reality is there's no such thing as a perfect safety record, because it's human beings. Everybody, that whole chase to zero is such a fallacy in my opinion. You should be congratulating people for communicating that they've had a moment of lapse, and let's train them better. Let's help other people not have that. So I am so grateful that you come here, Eric. We could have 3 or 4 podcasts based on just this journey and of yours. If there's anything that we can do to serve your needs, I would love that. But most importantly, if there's anything that I can do personally to help you along the journey, I would love that. And thank you for joining us. And I'll make sure that everybody gets your information on the podcast post. And I wanted to congratulate you on a wonderful life and family too.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I do appreciate the opportunity. I think, these types of medians are, what we should be using to talk about safety and share experiences and, just in general, talk about how good our industry is too. I mean, this is a great industry, the construction industry. I'll leave with this, I guess. It's not me, it's the people that work around me. If you have a good, strong team and, everyone's focused on, the same goals, it makes everything a lot easier. And, we really have a great team here in the civil side of Balfour Beatty, and I'm just really blessed to have them around me. And, if you want me to, be a part of another podcast, I'd be more than happy to jump on. And if, want to talk a little more in depth about, the safety side, or be more than happy to do that with you.
I would absolutely love that. I always try to make this particular podcast about human beings and the journey, because at the end of the day, it's really easy to get caught up in regulations and policies and infractions and all that stuff. That's the what, but the why in these conversations of how do we help each other be more successful, and how do I identify the traits that would help you be more successful in our pro network, and how we onboard people and the questions that we ask, and making sure that we're asking the things that are important, which often aren't regulatory related. It's communication style, it's capability, it's experience, it's the journey. I am going to take you up on that, Eric. We will do another one of these. Maybe we'll talk about a specific project or a specific challenge, or frankly, just a mission to improve the industry. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.